Hey lovelies, we're back. This is Rea Bow +1. Yes, if you're on WBN 324, if you want to learn more about the radio station, is WBN 324 with a space between the letters and numbers. Today we've got a guest on, and his name is Gran Torino, or I think we call him GT these days. He is one of the patriot voices for Ireland, makes a lot of noise, calls a spade, and you just got to love him from that. Hey GT, how you doing?
Morning Ray, how are you? Hi, hello listeners.
I'm very good, thank you. So I'm sort of thrilled to get you on to learn a bit more about you. So at the moment, my darling, tell us a bit about your current timeline. What's going on in your world at the moment?
Well, I've just concluded a little run interviewing some independent candidates here for the European elections, because our state apparatchik, RTE, redundant, treacherous echo chamber, that I've now called it, has excluded some of the independent voices and just handpicked a select few by their own criteria. But I managed to grab a few independent candidates, which I think went across really well and gave them a voice on the platform. And there's some very strong results, some very great comments, and we'll see how it translates today, because today is the European elections voting.
Right, so the one when we spoke off air, I was talking about his name's something McCormack, who I really liked, I really resonated with. What's his name?
Kieran McCormack.
Kieran McCormack. Is he running, is he?
Not just yet. He's just been sort of elevated up to the National Party, and he'll be running, as I would imagine, as one of their candidates in the general elections. I think the National Party's strategy has been to allow some of the other voices to stand in the European elections, and they're going to focus their efforts on the general elections, which I'm presuming will be called soon, because this government is on very shaky ground, and our Taoiseach is on, his polling numbers are really low.
I'm not surprised. He's a voice for Europe, isn't he? Not for Ireland.
As he said himself on one of the mainstream news channels there, that on these issues, when he was speaking in regards to the border, with the Brexit coming on board, he said he is the voice of Europe in all these matters. So he's firmly ensconced himself in the federalist camp.
And when he made that statement, do you think, so you know, like the general people, they're working hard, they're just trying to put food on the table. Do you think they actually hear what he's saying, as in, I'm not a voice for Ireland, I'm a voice for Europe? You know, do you think they hear that, GT?
I think because of that statement, they're tuning in more and more now. I think patriots and nationalists here in Ireland see the way that we're having a plethora of referendum after referendum, and particularly after the abortion referendum, people were, well, you've seen the Dublin Castle celebrations by the people when the abortion law was passed. But then following on a couple of months afterwards, then it was understood that there would be no anaesthesia for fetus during an operation. And I think most people were abhorrent upon that information. And again, it just proves how duplicitous our governments are. They're not giving us proper debate. They're not giving us proper information. And again, here with the European elections happening today, we've also got a divorce referendum ensconced, mixed up with the elections. So we're being asked to vote on recognising foreign divorces it's like a part B. But the headliner, that the way they're trying to sell it, is that they want to reduce the 5-year period for divorce to 2 years. And that sounds pretty reasonable. Nobody would really question that, 2 years, because I myself went through a period of the divorce, 5 years. I didn't find it particularly stringent or hard, but I would have no trouble reducing it to 2, but no further than that. But another part of that, like a part B, is the recognition of foreign divorces. And over the last 24 hours now, especially on my Facebook page, I released a kind of a meme information, and I kind of semi-knew that the wording was ambiguous, but it caused an absolute storm on my Facebook page, because it feared that child brides or child marriages would be recognised, leading on then to polygamy from the usual suspects. And that's caused quite a stir. But we've had no real debate here about what the divorce referendum entails. It just says there will be a recognition of foreign divorces. The question being then, if you're recognising the divorces, you're going to have to recognise foreign marriages. And different cultural differences. It's not a big leap to imagine that, foreign marriages in the future, should another government come in and want to change things, we will have given them full access, like we did with the children's referendum. We gave the state complete control over our children now, which I think is a more worrying trend, because when I travel around, people are just coming up to me and speaking about Tulsa, which is our child protection services, practically taking children away from their parents at a whim. So again, I'm seeing, from my point of view and from my viewpoint, is another usurpation of our constitution, whittling away our rights and bringing them into line to the European Union's criteria, or whatever standards they want to push. So we're not having any real debates. Our national broadcaster is not facilitating independent candidates who come with very strong voices and great strategies. And I think they're afraid of them. That's why they're excluding them from the debate.
I think they're really lacking argument. I mean, when you have, within a social fabric of any society, if there's rapid dynamic change, it's going to cause a disturbance, isn't it? So if you have a culture coming in with diametrically opposed views, I would suggest that my right and wrongs and your right and wrongs from your Indigenous people and my Indigenous people, we've inherited our values and morals from Christian-based values. And when we have this kind of influx of people coming in with really different views, so right and wrongs is a serious business, isn't it? To me, it is wrong for an older guy to hook up with a really young girl. But yet in the Middle East, where they're coming from, this is an acceptable part of their morality. Now, if they want to do that over there, I don't have a problem with that. If they're going to bring it over here, I think they must know that A, morally, the indigenous species will have an issue with it, and B, they should be allowing them to speak about their concerns, the breach of this inherited moral from the indigenous species. So it's beyond me. It seems very corrupt to me that they won't allow the indigenous species to go, well, wait a minute, hold it a minute. We've learned all our lives through the faith that has been here. This is wrong. So why all of a sudden is it right? Do you think that's about right, GT?
Yeah, and I would just like to say on your first point, I would even have a problem with it over there. I mean, for me, I've always been about I've said it before, the whole reason I got into all of this was my very first video was female genital mutilation here in Ireland, another cultural practice that's accepted elsewhere in the world. But we're facilitating that. Am I breaking up?
No, you're fine. Carry on.
I'm just saying we're facilitating that now. That practice that generally comes from the Somali groups of people, but they're flying their children out back home and having, I'll call them witch doctors, because there's no medical procedure that requires female circumcision, so they can't be doctored. But these children are flown out and then brought back to Ireland, presenting with medical complications. Some very drastic injuries occur to them. But our answer is to create two of the best female genital mutilation recovery. What would you call them? Centers, yeah. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain melt there. Yeah, our answer is then to say we've got two of the best European centres to facilitate this, but you never recover from a FGM.
No.
I read Ayan Hershey Ali's books, and when she explains her procedure and stuff like that, and her recovery period, even to this day, she's had children and stuff like that, but it's had a huge adverse complications on her. And luckily enough, now she's come to a stage now where she can take care of them medical problems over there. But I just said no. That to me is child abuse. And through that, and then my understanding of, we gave away our rights to our children over here in the children's referendum through ambiguous language use again. The state now has more control over children than the parents. So none of these parents of the children that were brought back were ever prosecuted, even though it's illegal, it's against the law. Actually, I lie. There was one prosecution of a parent, and he was fined €100. So this, as I keep calling it, the usurpation of our constitution, the whittling down of our inalienable rights granted to us by God. And people say, well, here we go, another Bible bash. It's not, it's about the use of language. God is just an inference to a higher power other than human beings that are inalienable, that are ours by design as human beings, our morality framework. And the protection of children is paramount because they're the future. And if we are, here we are, as you can see we've got new curriculum coming over here now that are teaching children near 0 to 4 about the sexual pleasure in 2-year-olds, masturbation. I mean, 3 and 4, it's ridiculous. And anybody can go over there. We've just had it fact checked. It is being installed into our curriculum over here. And it's just crazy to me how parents can even allow or think to allow the state to teach your children about sexual pleasure at such a young age, at a redundant age. They shouldn't even know about these things. And I'm just puzzled, and I get very frustrated about it. But again, going back to your question, the government seems to give us a limited hangout, and it's dressed up in a parade. So the parade this time now is the European elections, and we need people in there to fight our cause in Europe. Europe is crumbling and dying, not only as a culture at the moment, but the edifice that is the European Union is in free fall. And all of this bells and whistles, trumpets are a big distraction to the coming financial crisis that is just around the corner. Anyone's paying attention. Deutsche Bank is creeping down towards $6 a share, and that's going to have a global effect, because Deutsche Bank is something like 55 to 57 trillion in debt. So they're just masking over. And I believe, sorry to go off on little different tangents, but I believe since President Trump's election, since he won and became President Trump, that they have ramped up their plans to such a degree now that I think the frog is jumping out of the pot going, hang on a minute, this isn't what we signed up for. This is just supposed to be a trading block. Now they're effectively telling us how to run our lives and manage our children.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. An overreaching state. All right, I'm taking notes as you go through the different stories. On the first one, FGM, I think to lean into somebody else's culture and tell them what to do, I appreciate what you're saying. And I would say this hangs a dark cloud over the United Nations, the UN, because they have got the likes of Saudi Arabia on the Human Rights Commission, which is, from a Westerner's point of view, is like, well, that's a bit nuts. And so with the whole FGM story within the UN community, which is most of the 196 countries in the world, I think, they should be taking issue with FGM. So I think if they're going to lean into our lives, the UN Migrant Compact, loads of the Paris Accord, all sorts of things, they should also, if they want to take that kind of responsibility on to affect our lives, they should be taking on the responsibility of FGM as well. So I think it hands a very dark cloud, A, over The Hague, and B, over the UN Commission as well. They should be dealing with this thing if the likes of most of the Middle East are going to sign up to the United Nations. I think that's a really important point to take a look at. And in terms of the EU falling apart, I would bring up, it's called the European Union. Well, in fact, it's not actually a union, because the one thing, when they tried to unify different speaking countries within Europe, to unify that country, they came in and basically said it was a trade agreement. From there, they went into legislation. So through this legislation, we've become so intertwined lawfully. They've come in and they've basically said, you can trade with anybody in our bloc, and for this trade, we want to make laws for your country. We're going to take control of your country. So that is like a unification to a central power that's unelected, that the upper echelons, your Junckers and Barniers and so on, is what they didn't do. They didn't consolidate debt. So basically, who would agree to this in the 70s and 80s and 90s as the EU developed? And if someone said to you, I'll come into your house, so I'm using household economics, and said, I'm going to make all the rules for your house, but if I get that wrong, you pay the debt. So one underlying thing for anybody listening to this, if you speak to a Europhile, is how can you call it a union when fiat currency by default occurs debt, but you haven't unified the debt? Greece is responsible for theirs, Ireland's responsible for theirs, but yet you make our rules. Who would sign up for that? Why is that a good idea? I think it's absolutely bizarre. So that's my take on it. I think it's an absolute con, I do, GT. GT, you still there?
Yeah, sorry, Rado. Bit of disturbance in the forest there. I just missed out on the last part of your question there.
Okay, I'll just repeat the last part on the European FGM. I said that it was a black cloud over the UN and The Hague. And regarding the European Union, it's not a union because they didn't consolidate debt. Each country, if you go to talk debt with the European Union, the unelected bunch at the top, the Junkers, they'll say it's your country's responsibility, right? So when it comes to debt, but all the laws are down to the EU. So that is like, you'd have to be nuts to sign up for that. That'd be like owning a company and saying, all right, you come and make the rules for us, but if you get it wrong, we're responsible for the debt. So it's a risk to reward basically, isn't it? So the risk is social. All the risk on the deal is social, and all the reward is privatized, and there's a barrier to entry to get the goods, to get a piece of the action. You can't, as a regular person, you can't get the rewards, but you take all the risk. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and a brief summation. Yeah, in essence, I think you're right. It's having your cake and eating it. You know what I mean? We're going to dictate how you do it, but should we muck up and make a mess? It's down to the ordinary Joe Soap, the ordinary citizen, to bail out all the big players, all the banks, politicians, blah blah blah. Just to narrow it down to that small point of view. Yeah, you're exactly right. But for me, like the UN is another organization, another corrupt organization that facilitates human trafficking and misery, and is just, I would say, is the equivalent to the Americans' war machine. They just basically sell arms. That's essentially what the UN wants to do, and install its soldiers throughout the world under the guise of a peacekeeping force. When I served back in the 90s, our troops went over to Bosnia to cover Bosnia, and some of the lads were bringing back then was an absolute. I have to refrain from cursing, but it was an absolute disgrace. Our rules of engagement were even changed, but we couldn't protect any of the citizens around or anything there that were happening right in front of us unless we were directly fired upon. I mean, you had to literally take a bullet before you could enact any sort of reaction. So the UN facilitated that. They actually changed the rules. This is the Bosnian Croatia situation that was unfolding back at the time, and we were just basically told to stand there and watch as horrors were unfolding in front of us. You know, that to me rang a bell. Could never trust that organisation. But then going back to your other question, when we signed up to the European Economic Union, as it was back at the time in the 70s, it was just to be a trade bloc. It was the beginning of the globalist plan for free trade, free movements of people. Which here we are, some 20, 30 years later on, and we can see the absolute horrors. I mean, the free movement of people is free labour. So what is business going to do? It's going to look for the cheapest labour it can find at all costs to maximise its profits. And free trade, again, the same sort of thing. We'll move manufacturing out and bring it back in. We'll produce it cheaper elsewhere outside the union, and then we'll bring it back here and sell it at an exorbitant price. And it's just not working out. I mean, the free labour markets are destroying careers and families over here, because now we've got, Europe has some 500 million citizens with a right to move into any market that it wants. And if you're a citizen, you know, you're indigenous citizen here, you've got your family, you've got your house, your mortgage, your bills to pay for, and then you're being undercut by cheap labour coming in, sharing 6 to a room. Like some of our rent prices here now at the moment, being advertised at €500-600 for a sofa in a shared apartment. we've got €700 for bunk beds. Like, you'll have three bunk beds in a box room. People effectively coming in, and it's just a place to stay. It might as well be hostels. So it's creating other markets. Airbnb are springing up now, and they're cornering the markets from the hotels. The hotels are struggling from lack of trade. We've got slum landlords. You know, most of our 33% of our politicians are millionaires. Something like 23% of them are actual landlords. So they're complicit in this misery. They're buying up properties because they know which way the market's gone. They've got the early advantage of the early knowledge of what the plan is. Hence the increased pressure on our housing markets. And the way it's described to people is the profit before people, as they call them over here. One of our communist parties say that the government isn't just building social houses quick enough, and it's the government's fault. When we say, well, hang on a minute, you've got open borders, you've got this outside force that's the direct pressure on the housing market. And again, we're turning to the nanny state. These people look to the government to question it. You can't have open borders and social housing at the same time. You can only have one without the other. And we're beginning to see the effects of that, particularly here in Dublin, Cork. Our homelessness situation now is this third world. I'm someone with a broadcast there in my last few with the Independents. There was a story of a young man, 24, living in Naas, who was a single child, an only child from a family, parents since gone. He's out on his own, 24 years of age, living in a tent, can't get a PPS number, can't get a job because he's no house, can't get a PPS number because he's no address, and is effectively living out of a tent and expecting the local priest to give him a loaf of bread and ham. You know, it's an absolute sham and a sham. But the government, as I see it, as the state, is just placating NGOs and the virtue signalers. Oh, we must sort this out. When I had a candidate on there, Professor Dolores Cahill, in one of my interviews, I strongly recommend any of your viewers or your listeners now to tuning in to give that interview with Professor Cahill a listen, because I firmly believe she is our Trump-esque type candidate. She's the chairwoman of the Irish Freedom Party, which I am involved with, you know, getting it out there, getting this alternative viewpoint out. She is so articulate, and she has an answer. We have like 65,000 empty vacant properties, and we could effectively resolve the homeless situation in a fell swoop. But that's not what the incumbent governments want, seems to be. But this independent Professor Cahill is just coming across with some great strategies. She's a business owner. She's a tenured professor. She's worked within the European Union. She knows the inner workings and how to get around it. But such a clear, calm and concise voice. I firmly believe she will be Ireland's Trump. She'll do really well. So I implore your listeners to keep an eye out for herself and the Irish Freedom Party.
What's her name again, GT?
Professor Dolores Cahill, Dolores Cahil. She spells it a little bit different than the normal.
Okay, yeah, guys, go and check that out. And I've got to say, as I listen to you speaking, GT, these are real issues for real people, aren't they? And when you look at the likes, I mean, because we've got Nan on our Sunday show, Sunday Long Live. That's live every Sunday, lovelies. If you don't know it, that's live 5 a.m. Eastern Standard US, 10 a.m. UK, and 9 p.m. New South Wales, Australia. We're live every Sunday, and Nan is our voice for Ireland. And she keeps
She's fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, she is, yeah. I gave her an invite to come on here, but it's too early for her, you know. I was having a bit of a chuckle about that. But that aside, what you're talking about, you know, when you look on the likes of RTE, now, I went to Ireland. I had a ball in Ireland. And this is kind of, I think about 15 years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I toured the Southwest, met loads of lovely people and had a ball, I got to say. And I absolutely adored everybody, and they were really welcoming and all that kind of stuff. So I have a big love for Ireland. I have a connection to Ireland. And
but you could see the change. Could you not see the change walking around? Could you not see the change? Could you not feel an anxiety among the people?
Well, it's what
there is.
I'll tell you what I come across with, 15 years ago, was it going through these kind of, I just don't think the vector was at this point 15 years ago, was it?
No, it was nowhere near. It was just slow encroachment. I mean, we've had refugees, we've had different diaspora coming in and moving out to the West Coast, and because our communications, our broadband and communications are outside of the main cities are basic. I mean, you'd probably get better reception in Africa than you would here in Ireland, and I believe that's firmly by design to keep the routes of communication between the rural and the city dwellers apart, because we've got a town here in Longford, which is at 45, nearly 50% saturation of foreign nationals to indigenous population. That's huge, and only in the last 15 years have these demographic changes come in place. And to give you some sort of comparison, over the last 30, 40 years of open borders within the UK, you've reached, I think, 18%, no, 16%. You're coming up on the crunch time. In the 15 years that we've had it, we're at 20% foreign national to indigenous populations. So we've already passed what Pamela Geller, I keep referring back, Pamela Geller refers to this 16%. If the population's demography changes, that foreign nationals are at 16%. And especially with certain cultures, you can say that's a tipping scale, because demographically they produce four children per couple, where we do 1.5 on the stats. So demographically, the ticking time bomb for future generations is already in place over here.
I mean, that's some of the problem with the forward thinking, is that I did the numbers on this. So I got the numbers publicly in terms of the relationship between Christianity, the indigenous, let's say the indigenous culture, what the indigenous culture was based around, and the culture of Islam. And I got the stats from 2001, 2011 and 2016. Its current vector rate for the UK by 2045, Christians to Islamic worshippers will be 50-50 by 2045 at its current vector. And you're absolutely right. All the statistics said every 10 years, the Islamic population doubles in the UK. And they're quite dramatic numbers, because I think a lot of people, they're working hard and they don't have chance to dig around. And like you say, like you're tackling homelessness, a very real problem, street level misery, and that's exactly what the government do not want you talking about. I mean, if you go and scale RT, I mean, look at RTE, sorry, the news outlet for Ireland, used to be green, now it's blue. I mean, just a colour change was shocking enough, because I love the Irish green colour. And those kind of real world, homelessness is what shows in a failing economy, isn't it? And the last thing they want is someone like you hitting the street going and pointing out their failings, because they just want everybody to think that it's all going swimmingly well, where in actual fact, like you said, you got 600 euros for a sofa. I mean, who can do that? And what kind of life is that? So I can understand. I know you get a lot of grief. I know you do, and many others do. And you're almost in a heightened state of awareness to someone like myself. I'm fully public. I've been broadcasting for quite a few years. But in Ireland, it's a different ball game, isn't it? And it's taken me to meet Nan, who is our Irish host on a Sunday, and some of the daily shows, for me to understand how stressful it is in Ireland. So I kind of get it, GT, where you're going, well, wait a minute, you're up there in your shiny millionaire houses, an unelected Taoiseach, as it were, and what goes with it, voicing the EU, and it's all going, well, we're going to bring more people into an economic system. I've seen nothing from Taoiseach to say what he is going to build in terms of infrastructure. I've not seen anything in terms of preparation of finances to house and look after not only the people coming into Ireland, but the indigenous people that are already got a problem. And you come along and point out all the homelessness and all the problems. So I'm not kind of surprised they're not happy with you, GT.
Yeah, I the docs and the usual stuff, I was quite prepared for it. I knew it was kind of coming, and I was in that position where I didn't really have that much. I don't have that much to live. I'm separated from my wife and kids, and that just transpired. Not a man of means anymore, so they can't really take anything away from me. So I thought, if it's nobody else, it might as well be me, because I was, as I said to you earlier on, I think on a previous recording, that I was involved in the Q phenomenon and doing a deep dive research on the what's going on over stateside as we understand it. And we spoke about the Pfizer warrant being the Pfizer declassifications happening this weekend. And I said to you, we've been waiting for 2 years. Alternative media, such as yourself and myself and other great platforms, we seem to have the ability to see these problems. We can react, we can broadcast, we can talk about it, and we have much more of an effect on people's lives because we're in people's pockets, where mainstream is still out in your living room, and that's already destroyed the family, because everybody's either sat on phones or not even sat together in the room. We all have our own individual news sources coming through. But alternative media seems to be have the inside line on what's happening. And through that process, going through the American channel when I was working over with Patriot Soapbox and stuff like that, it kind of gave me a grounding to speak, to understand Discord channels, to broadcast, and effectively pipe up and ring the bell and warn people about what's coming on. And that's elevated to such a stage now where I am an individual entity, where I have created my own platform, the Gran Torino, and I am talking about subjects that the mainstream wouldn't even dare go near. And I have to say, it is having an effect to some degree, is that I am becoming more recognised out in the street, and I'm not a fame fag. I've never got into this looking for any sort of what would you say,
recognition,
some recognition or anything like that. That's come about. But on the flip side, my personal life has been completely exposed. My housing address, my addresses have been doxed. I've had to move home twice. My business has been just more or less destroyed. With lefties and the usual suspects coming in and bringing customers or running smear campaigns. So I said, right, you've destroyed my chances of working, so I'm going to do this full time. So now I am a full time YouTube content creator, as I call myself. And I was recently spoken about in Hate Not Hope, or Hope Not Hate, whatever. That article that's destroyed a few of the vloggers. Last Thursday there, they wrote an article about me, linking me to far right extremism. I'm a family man. I'm concerned about my children's futures and other children. As I said, it was the FGM and children's rights that got me into this, the protection of children. So not only my children, as I've said, I try and keep my language very specific and neutral. I don't blame either left, right. I don't blame business for doing what it's doing. I blame us for taking our eye off the ball, because at the end of the day, the responsibility is on its citizenry to monitor its government. And we've allowed our governments, successive governments. I mean, since the formation of the state in 1937, we've only had the two ruling parties, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, in power. We've never had an alternative government or an alternative voice in power. We've become laissez-faire and just allowed successive governments and nepotistic family dynasties to take positions of power. I'm not just going to bring it back to the colonisation or the English, the British colonisation of Ireland, but we've come at this. We seem to have this kowtowed backbone seems to be taken out of the Irish. You know what I mean? Because they've made us comfortable. They've turned us into consumer units, and now we're just chasing the mortgage. Now everybody's just frantically chasing the mortgage. Two parents both out at work, handing the children over to the state in Montessori's or childcare, and allowing the state to educate your children. And we can see that having an effect now with the millennials. These are the first outcrop of state card college leavers that are coming out, and they seem to be lost in a melee of ideology that's just tricked them and confused them and kept them in situ and in the colleges, and reinforced it with communist teachers. I can only say they would call themselves libertarian kind of teachers, but no. There's been no conservative voices, outspoken conservative voices in academia here. There's been shutting downs of invited speakers And it's only when you start paying attention and looking back through the archives that you see who the people that who have been banned. And these are the people that have speaking out against Islam and kind of criticizing Islam over here. Pretty much like what you had in the UK or in the United States, across the world, where speakers are shut down for bringing forward alternative voices. And that's where the Grand Torino was coming into play over here. Is I don't come out expressing my opinion. I try not to speak too much. I just allow the people that I invite on to speak uninterrupted and unfettered. Not necessarily unchallenged, but nobody that I've brought on has said anything ridiculous. Or I would say, I just let them speak their piece and give the people, my viewers, my listeners, my subscribers, the chance to go through their full hypotheses of what they're speaking about and to chew over it, rather than constantly checking and berating and confusing the situation. So yeah, alternative media is having an effect, because we've got some other great YouTubers now sticking their head up as well, and some other great independent candidates coming forward and speaking out. I want to push our listeners towards Gemma O'Doherty. I'm sure Nana Na's probably spoken about Gemma O'Doherty over here, independent investigative journalist, and she is going to be one of the rising stars. She is the rising star over here, and she's causing huge storms. And she's the wrecking ball of conversation over here, because she's gritty, determined, and she can't be controlled. She's very much her own opinion, her own voice, and she's speaking about the New World Order, as we'll call them, or the European Union's bulldozing of our constitution. And it's having an effect. I'm just hoping time that people will react and engage with each other and come together and just get rid of this nepotistic governments that we've had in place, and seek out alternative voices with new strategies and new directions for Ireland that I think will lead us in a completely different direction. But first of all, for me, the most paramount thing is our exit. The one and only way that we can speak to people about the horrors that are going on in the world, that are these forces that are trying to manipulate our very societies for, I'll call it, just to nefarious ends, flooding the markets, flooding our countries with different cultures, different mindsets, and it's eventually going to lead to a civil war if it's not left to check, because this clash of cultures will affect our children. It's there in front of you if only you'll see. But as I say, most people in Ireland specifically are walking around with eyes wide shut, because it's the mortgage, it's the comfortable lifestyle. As long as I can, have my cappuccino fracca moche at the weekend. And politics is an absolute mess, so I'm not going to engage in that. Like one of our last elections, only 25% of the population voted in the general election. There's just such a disengagement. But I think that's where alternative media, such as yourself and myself and other platforms, are going to come in and kind of mix up the pot and start stirring people to start engaging in politics.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ourselves, our mission statement on Sunday Long Live Radio, which broadcasts on a Sunday, was to reach new people and create a format. So my groove, if you like, isn't as hard hitting as yours. I go for a lighter approach, a more familiar format, that is easier on the ears, and for people of different opinions to come and engage with. And I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you have a different point of view, maybe you listen to us and you agree, and maybe you listen to us and you don't agree. Either, particularly if you're part of the you don't agree, get in touch with me. I'd love to chat with you and have a reasoned conversation so I can learn your point of view and what we've said that you don't agree with. And you can contact me through WBN324. Just type that in your browser, WBN, then a space, then 324. Go to the website. You'll see the email me, and I would love to chat with you on air for us all to learn and try and bring this healing process together. We have a patriot situation, I believe, where the voice is not allowed to be heard. And then we have a forward moving voice. It's all joy of the EU that's getting all the oxygen. Ireland has a mainstream platform, RTE, that isn't voicing any kind of patriot point of view at all. It's all EU. And for those who don't know, the EU mission statement, when you walk in that big shiny building in Brussels, the EU mission statement on a plaque reads like this: national sovereignty is the root cause of the most crying evils of our times. The only final remedy for this evil is the federal union of the peoples. So there will be no borders. It's open borders and plus lots inviting in. So with that kind of dynamic structural change, if you don't agree with what you're saying, surely you can come and speak to me and say, look, I know that the government has put in place a spending plan to allow to be a host country to people coming in. You know that the housing infrastructure is there for affordable housing. You know the infrastructure that's in place for the UN Migrant Plan Compact, the UN Migrant Compact. So if you come on and you want to rebut what's being said here, come in with those kind of numbers, those kind of statistics, so I can see, if nothing else, just for me, if nothing else, that I can see that you have a governance system based on competency. And with this competency, there is a full yielding report over the next 50 years of how they are going to manage this influx of people coming in and how they are going to manage the indigenous culture that's already screaming misery. So I want to ask another question to GT. GT,
Sorry, Ray. I just want to cut it just a little quick one before I forget, because before you asked me that question as well, I've come across. I'm going across now with a different tact. I'm no longer, not that I'm not willing to engage or engage with the opposition, shall we say, or people with a different train of thought. I'm just appealing to my audience, my subscribers, people that I know that are open and honest and reflective in their thought. And they don't want to come into a conversation just to win. They come to a conversation to listen and to learn something. And then to walk away, chew the fat, and then maybe come across with a different point of view. But I think our situation here, particularly in Ireland, because I think everything that happens in Europe, when it gets here, it'll happen 10 times faster, as I've already explained to you with the demographic changes that are already in place. So my tact now is I'm not going to engage so much with people that are just going to come across and argue for semantics sake or allow their cognitive dissonance or their wall to shut down and break away. I'm just appealing to my subscribers. I'm appealing to the people that will listen, have a basic understanding of what I and others are talking about, and I want to build on that platform to get my own voter block, because I feel it's imperative for me next year to run as an independent candidate, or I might sign up with a party and get into politics properly. So I'm going to use my platform as the vehicle to raise my voter block, my voter base, and speak to my, as I would say, constituents now, one-on-one, through Facebook, through YouTube, while I have these open platforms, and to promote myself and to promote these ideas and to be the voice for an alternative viewpoint, for an alternative direction for Ireland. And I'm going to stick my head up above the parapet, but I'm going to do it. I'm not going to go on mainstream. I'm not going to talk to the radio shows. I'm going to speak to my electorate directly, and they can ask me questions there directly. If I do a show, something similar like yourself, or a call in where they can speak to me on certain issues. But if you come in just arguing with the point, or you come in with a negative attitude, I don't have time to listen to you. You're gone, you're banned, you're off my platform. I only want voices that, not that necessarily agree with me, no kickback, but clearly and honestly see the problems and recognize and can speak truthfully from their heart without fear of being slandered. Even if you do get slandered, we have to push beyond that now, because it's meaningless. The isms, the racisms, the phobias. The time is too short for that now. We need to start making changes. And if you see, like I said to you, I'm appealing to the people that would possibly elect me and to represent their points of view rather than engage in the conversations, because it just slows the process down. And it just seems to allow these plans, these actions just to carry on unfettered, unchallenged. So that's effectively my strategy going forward now. I think I have to get involved in politics. I don't want to, but I will.
You're brave. Anyway, so no, totally. So there you go, lovelies. You've heard GT's point of view. I run a radio network, so my approach to this is different. I want to talk to those people. I don't want to argue with anybody. That's not it. I want to have a decent round the kitchen table style conversation, see if there is areas that we agree on, see where we don't agree on, like a sensible, reasoned adult conversation. I don't want to get involved in a slagging match. I don't want to bring a guest on and slaughter them. That's not it. It's about bringing the best out for everybody. Yeah, if anybody sits round a table, surely couldn't we all agree that we want to bring the best out in each other, not the worst? So I don't want to engage in the negative stuff. I know you've had your share. I've been really lucky. I've not had any grief. Well, I have had some grief for covering the Rotherham rape gangs. But outside of that, it's kind of been a pretty good run. So, no, I appreciate your point of view. I think you've made your statement beautifully there. And I think you will get votes as well. But from someone who runs a network, I would personally, I would like to speak to some people to see what stats, the numbers, the audit, the reports. I'd like to know what they know about that. So I can learn, if nothing else.
That's exactly where a broadcaster should come in, to allow oppositional viewpoints to come together and address their grievances, on a platform that allows each point of view to be heard unfettered. But we don't get that. So I can't play by them old rules anymore. I just have to appeal to my voter block and go make a difference with my standing army behind me, whatever the numbers may be. And if enough people come behind me and others like me, then we can affect a change, because it's not that we're not engaging in the ideas process. It's that you won't listen, you won't change to anything that we're saying now. So we're gathering force, and we are gonna speak our minds through our votes. And we need a representative. You need a representative to do that. Now, obviously, someone like Professor Cahill, which I mentioned earlier, is far more eloquent. But the ordinary Joe Soap, the plasters, the builders, the day-to-day folks, they need a representative, a voice in there that they understand. Yeah, he understands my life. He may be not to be the most eloquent person. He may not be the most educated, but he's a team builder. He's a team player. He wants what's the best for this country, not only for his people, but for all people's, not only for his children, other people's children, and the people that are coming here with their children when they become ensconced in here. Because if the clash of cultures comes, as I predicted it would, it's all children are going to be affected. So why not just speak up, speak out, and hopefully enough people agree with you and with your point of view and give you their vote and give you their support.
I think your approach is for your goal. I think your approach is spot on. For mine as a broadcaster, we live in an age in the mainstream. So WBN 324 carries across 25 radio platforms, 2 FM masts. Wow. We've got coverage. We peak out at around 110, 120,000 listener peak. So we have reach, and it's to have that. And one of them is an Irish platform as well. So we go out in Ireland, and with this, it's to bring that conversation round the kitchen table style. It's just being honest and nobody being mean to each other. It's about bringing people together. So my sort of mission is different from yours, but I would love to help you and anybody else. So if you come across any other Patriots, GT, I would love to bring them on to WBN and just see what they've got to say for other people to listen to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to do that for you.
And so I want to talk about the Celt culture within Ireland, because when I was there, it was really Celtic. To me, it was really Celtic, and I loved that. There was an ease, there was a history, there was a knowing, there was a quiet strength, there was community, all these things. Do people still speak of the Celtic culture, GT?
Yeah, people of my Gen X, my age group, to a lesser degree as we go down, because the cultural Marxism is the new de rigueur cultural identity that most of the youth kind of identify with. The blue rinse, purple haired brigade, and outward projections of my feelings, my victim mentality, because they've essentially been misinformed. Just misinformed and stuff like that, and they haven't been given a chance or how to critically think for themselves, how to check both sides of the argument. They've been ideologicalized, if that's the word, and indoctrinated to such a degree that they won't even check their own epistemology. They won't even check how they come to know what they know and question it. So, and our Irish language is going to be removed from schools. Irish history is going to be removed from schools soon. We're already being instructed to take the crucifixes out of schools and churches and hospitals for fear of offending other people. That to me is wrong. That to me is out the door. It was our Christian values, whether you believe in God or not. And I already said to you that about the inalienable rights, that inalienable rights puts it out of the reach of humans. You know, these founding principles that are written into our Constitution are beyond the approach of humans unless all the people come together to make a change. But the way our governments are set up now and are scraping away at the Constitution, they are gaining more and more power for themselves. And as my last speaker on my very last interview, she said, this is communism. If you cannot see that they're taking away our children's rights from us and giving it more to the state, taking away the marriage referendum and giving the state more control over marriage, again with this divorce referendum, she said, and I think she put it quite eloquently, it's only when they start coming from your property, which they are beginning to do now, that we will see this is outright communism. And communism, in all its guises and forms, has never worked, never works anywhere. You only have to look at the poor people of Venezuela, all that kind of jazz, or the usual arguments. That's why I'm very remiss to go into these conversations, because you'll have the same circular conversation time and time again, defending socialism. Well, that wasn't the real socialism. Look to Mao, look to Stalin, but yet the usual suspect in Germany is the worst person of all time, because a certain narrative is always just preached that this narrative cannot be questioned, and you are destroyed to even reproach or even critically ask about anything about that. And I am speaking guarded over there because I don't want to give people too much ammunition to attack me with, but I'm sure your listeners are aware of what I'm talking about.
I don't hear anything that you've said so far that is worthy of any kind of attack. I don't get. So I'm still like, I've known Nan and she's been educating me on Ireland a little while now, and I still find it hard. Why? To me, you've said nothing attack worthy whatsoever. So it leads me to say, do you feel this I'm going to go with the word attack. This attack on Irish culture, there's probably a better word, but I just haven't got it right now. This attack on Irish culture, is this with intent, or is this just a process where people have just been asleep?
No, this is by intent, because I think the Irish nationalists, when they are slowly raising and waking up, they will come to remember their roots. They will come to remember Brehon Law. They will come to remember, as John Connor spoke in Logos Rising in another interview, that we were tribes and we had tours. We had different locations throughout Ireland. We were a wandering nomadic sort of people way back in the day. He was talking about 1,000 years ago, before the colonisation. We were a nomadic tribe, and it was through that nomadicism that our culture, that nomadicism was a vehicle to protect our Irish heritage. And especially when the colonisation came, and then slowly but surely they've tried to restrict the movements of the indigenous people, and they became settled. But we still have outliers, or we would call them gypsies or travellers or tinkers. But the tinker nomadic lifestyle was set about to protect the Irish culture, because they couldn't be taxed on property. They couldn't be, because they were moving, you couldn't tax them. So they were free moving sort of people, and they weren't people of assets. They were people of a culture. So when the colonization came in and it started to make people settle down, and they put it under the guise after the famine, that we were just helping people out after the famine to reduce our culture. But my essence is, we're only 100 years, just over 100 years in control of our own destinies. We've gone from one colonizer to another, and we're handing it over. But I think that the innate, not barbarism, but the innate Celtic pride is still down there, but it's being drowned under cappuccinos, under globalism, under chasing the dollar. My car is shinier than your car. When innately as a culture, we're community driven. We're welcoming, friendly. We understand the world's ills of being attacked. We've never attacked. We don't expect to be attacked. We just want you to come here, appreciate our culture, have the crack agus ceol, And if you want to stay, assimilate, become Irish. You can be any colour, creed you want, but become Irish, respect the Irish culture. We're a friendly, giving person. But I do believe when the Irish barbarian wakes, that there will be a strong whiplash of response to this government when enough Irish I keep saying nationalists, Irish patriots awake and say, we are under assault. This ideology is not only has been kind of beneficial to us in the long run, in the short term, but we've been hoodwinked. We got 44 billion from the European Union. We've paid 77 billion back into it. We've been lumbered with 64 billion in debt. We're 250 billion in debt to the European Union, which is a nonsense. We've given over 200 billion of our fishing stocks to the European Union. Our natural gas, our Corrib, have all been signed away. The Corrib gas line, the gold and mineral wealths, mineral mines in the middle of the country that probably have an untapped vast resource of gold and silver are being given away to Canadian prospects. So are these brown enveloped nepotistic politicians are selling Ireland. And because of the control of media, the control over the conversation, the best thing that ever happened for the population was the internet, social media. And as much as they're trying to curb it down and restrict us now with hate speech laws, the genie is out of the bottle. And I think the tide will turn. The tide will turn. And it'll happen exponentially faster here in Ireland because we're a small nation, 6 million as it stands. And going back to your UN migration pact and the graph that they've since moved, there was these graph, I have it there, of saturation points per population that they think these nation states can hold. And Germany was at something like 477 million. And Ireland, they said, will have a peak saturation point of 65 million. They wanted 65 million that this country could effectively hold. And that's through the new agreements that they're the Euro-African agreements that they're making up to facilitate and make Africa a part of the European Union and allow free movements of people from Africa. And they're going on as if this is inevitability. We've had Bono's foundation. It came into one of the government meetings there and said, yeah, look, this movement of people, it's coming and Ireland has to prepare. We have to get ready. No, shut the door, protect our borders. We allow immigration. Of course we want immigration. Immigration is beneficial to all nations, but control immigration. Who are you? Where are you coming from? What's your criminal background? What's your medical background? If you don't meet the criteria, you're gone. You can't come in. We can't save the world. We're tiny. Let's look after ourselves and help ourselves and the people here of all races and ideologies. We need to protect our borders. That means getting out of Europe.
God, amen to that, brother. I'm going to refer to, so with the EU, so that point of view that I'm listening to there, I agree with GT for sure, but I'm going to read the mission statement of the EU again, which is totally contrary to what you said. Yeah. Quote, national sovereignty is the root cause of the most crying evils of our times. The only final remedy for this evil is the federal union of the peoples, which is open borders, basically. So with this, they're looking to, Ireland no longer has an identity. England no longer has an identity. It's Europe until it comes to pay the debt. Then you're a country. So this is that's a really big point, that is. So it's not unified. It's not consolidated. They didn't consolidate the debt, which is a byproduct from the instant production of fiat currency, and it should be outlawed. So I agree with you with the EU. And I want to ask you another question, GT. What was it? Go on.
No, sure, go ahead.
Okay, another question. When was it? What was the moment that you woke? You know, they say the woke. People are woke or red pilled or whatever, pink pills, whatever the term. What happened to you to go, hold it a minute, there's something really wrong here? When was it? Can you remember?
I think, like most of your listeners and most of my listeners, we've all had an inalienable, there's that word keeps creeping into me. We've all had a suspicion. We've all had a little itch. Something's not right, and but life is good. We can crack on. When I became disenfranchised, we're looking at the Black Mirror, the TV box, and you look at shows. You're looking at 20 minutes of shows and 45 minutes of ads. I disengaged from that. I stepped away from, I can't be doing that's filling my head full of nonsense. Even, like the Saturday night shows when I was sitting down with my families and stuff like that, and we watched the Come Dancing or all the usual nonsense. It's just fluff and filler. I wanted something a little bit more tangible for my mind, even for my own mind, something to digest on. So I started to channel surf on YouTube, and when YouTube came around, and didn't really understand it as much, but so I was learning carpentry because I was in the building game at the time, and I wanted to do some more fine carpentry and stuff like that. And it's when I came across Alex Jones, and I'd be forever grateful for that channel, or even starting my line of inquiry. He was so fantastical in the things that he was saying, and it kind of drew you in. But I went off and started doing my own research, and I think I mentioned it before, and it was on the Alex Jones show that Pamphlet and on an American Anon from the Discord channels came on to Alex Jones show and was looking for researchers to help out with the new phenomenon of Q. I don't know if we spoke about this on this recording, but through that, I joined the Discord. I became familiar with Discord, met a couple of people on there, and before you knew it, I was elevated onto that show that they'd started off a YouTube channel and started broadcasting. And through meeting great patriots throughout the United States and around the world now, because Q is a global phenomenon now. And I know if any of your listeners aren't involved in any of that, it might fly over your head. But it's this Q movement, this swelling of information that's been shared and passed through the Q that pointed us in the direction to do our investigations. MK Ultra, the adrenochrome, all the big conspiracies, as you'd say. And I'll say that word because people do conspire. I mean, builders conspire to build you a house. I know I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm a conspiracy analyst. And we haven't used tin foil, we use aluminum. But through that process, and I went back to the American histories. I understood the American Constitution. I went back and read Common Sense for the first time. I'd never even heard of it. And I read it out loud, maybe about half an hour on one show particular time. And it was at certain stages that it was so emotional for me. I was quite emotional reading it because I never got that chance to read that pamphlet. Like the pamphleteers in the United States, the whole understanding of the 1776 and how these Constitution and the Founding Fathers found that because they were classically trained, Latin, geography, that the basics, history, they understood these tenets, and we've lost all of that. Our education system is now designed to dumb us down. Padraig Pearse calls it the murder machine, whereas that the education system was left in tow to keep us cowed down, to keep us thinking that we were barbarians and that our occupiers were our betters and that they knew best. And that ethos is carried on even when the United Kingdom or the British left. They left that educational system in place, and we became weakened. Now, our Irish, we are a strong nation. That is one of our golden things. And that's the kind of thing that I got from the United Kingdom. And I hope that you find that resurgence is to look back to your history, to your traditions, to your cultural traditions, and be proud of them. Be proud of them. As colonizers or whatever it was, the Romans did the exact same thing, but they brought medicines, they brought transport, they brought medicine with them and all that kind of stuff. These are the parts of human nature that had to happen for our worlds to evolve to this level. But this level of nefariousness that's going around by a couple of thousand elite people that are completely out of touch with us and see us as sheeple and mock our constitution and our family values, our community-driven ethos to look after our neighbour. They've tried to separate us and keep us as individuals, especially with the phone and the new technologies coming out. But enough people are beginning to see that they can use this to fight back. They've given us all voices, and no matter how many they try and take out or they try and destroy, more and more voices are popping up saying, hang on a minute, this isn't right. I don't think this is the way we should be going. And people need to, not to wait, but to come to an understanding that this trajectory that we're all heading for is by design to destroy the nation state, as you read out by the UN. And it's a global thing. Lots of players around the world want this ethos, but you can see the rise now, national populism. The second biggest the second biggest party in the world now is India. They just voted in Modi. He's a nationalist populist in the Hindu nationalist, and they are bringing their manufacturing back to India. They are asking their manufacturing base to hire Indian nationals and keep their productions inside, because as we see with the free markets, when they export cheap labor and cheap manufacturing abroad and then bring it back, it's the exploitation of the countries that are producing, child slaves, children slaves, that's coming back. And we're here like thinking, I've got the latest super dry t-shirt, I've got the latest pair of trainers, when we all know deep down in our souls that some child is in a sweatshop, or some human being has had a dog's awful life to produce that for no benefit, for no kickback, for no decent living standard. And it's time we got out of that and start, supporting the nation states. We can be a community of nation states, but to look after our own vested interests, but work in conjunction with other nation states. And I think, more importantly, that I'm coming back to my understanding that if we become Christian nationalists, we will come together. Any nation that is under threat as Christians, we will go and defend and help that. But if we're just purely nationalists, we'll only just look after the nation interest, and any other country that's in trouble, that's your beef. But I think our Christian ethos, and I'm very remiss not to use Judeo-Christian, because there is no such thing as Judeo-Christian. There's Judeo values and there's Christian values, and that water doesn't mix well. And that's another understanding people need to come to term, that phrase has been used to muddy the waters. Christianity, in all its guises and forms, brings people together. It doesn't look for submission, and it doesn't look to take over. It comes with an understanding. But Christianity also defends itself. Jesus, the Lord, took up a sword and a whip and smashed and turned over tables when he came to the defense of things. So this turn the other cheek needs to be spoken about, because even if Jesus can bear arms and fight for Christianity, then we all should. Now, I've gone through the whole atheist stage, gone through the whole nihilism stage, and I think, even from my understanding, I believe there's a creator. I don't believe there's it's not that I don't believe it. There's not enough information on for me to give a definitive answer on that. But I think the Christian ethos is paramount, because it will bring us all more together than another ethos that just wants the benefit of men. It's for men, by men, and only for men, where women are treated as second-class citizens and children are just deemed as property. How can that be good? If they don't come to a reformation soon, the next 10 to 50 years, there's going to be war. And it's going to have to be, because the numbers are just getting out of control. So engaging in the polite conversation works, but sooner or later you got to stand up and say, no, this is me. I'm Irish. This is our country. All peoples are welcome here. The people that are here now, we can help everybody, but we need to protect our resources, our culture, our traditions, and our heritage, and start defending and speaking out about it. And I believe that's happening as well, right? Sorry, I was on the soapbox there for a second.
Oh, I'm loving it, my friend. I'm loving it. I bet the listeners are as well. And if you are just tuning in, this is Rea Bow +1. I've got GT on with me. We're just going round. I'm learning. I love learning new stuff. I'm learning about Ireland and what goes on, and like the real story. I'm doing air quotes, the real story of Ireland, not the shiny one, Saturday night politics that I seem to be getting off of RTE, where they're not talking about homelessness. They're not talking about people living in tents. They're not talking about people living in vans. And while I just go to that, I'm about to go to a Christian segment. But before I go to that, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but because in the West, because of a case of arbitrage, I'm sure you guys know what arbitrage is, but just in case you don't, it's where you take advantage of cheaper labour elsewhere. They're like corporate rules. My own belief is our national identity is being removed by creeping tyranny with intent. And with this intent, they're using corporate law to do the job, and they're being pretty damn successful at it. So wake up. But I'm going to point you out to something, is saying people are starting to live in vans. And I would say to you, if you're going to do a Patriot video, or you want to talk of real life, like the real life stuff, use the hashtag van life. Hashtag van life. It's a massive hashtag. It started off, I believe, in California, where there's loads of homeless people outside of Google because they can't afford an apartment, and they're using that hashtag van life. I'm going to move on to another Christian one here because GT's gone Christian, and I want to read a title to you. And we covered this with Nan, Irish Nan, love you Nan, and DB and Scotty. And we went into this, spoke about it round the kitchen table, and the title of it was Christian Persecution, It's Official. And the headline is Political Correctness Drives Global Persecution and Genocide of Christians. Prepared by the Reverend Philip Montestephen, the Bishop of Truro, and the Anglican missionary. The report established that 1 in 3 people worldwide experience some form of religious oppression, finding Christians are the most widely targeted group. Evidence shows not only the geographic spread of anti-Christian persecution, but also its increasing severity, said the report, adding that in some reports, the level and nature of persecution is arguably coming close to meeting international definition of genocide. And the headline on the report, which I can drop the link in, is Bishop of Truro's independent review for the Foreign Secretary of FCO support for persecution of Christian. This is a reference document. It's an interim document. So if anybody says to you, if you start to say, look, I'm starting to take issue, I think Christians are getting a tough time, there's an official UK paid for document saying that very thing. What do you make of that, GT?
Yeah, about time. Just to give people some sort of a reference point that they can go, look, here's the actual facts here. We've got something coming back. Somebody's actually gone and made a report. I mean, the dog on the street can say over in India or in any Islamic country or in Africa, that Christians are the most persecuted ideology, I would say, on the planet. But yet, if you look at mainstream, you'd swear Islam was being berated around the world and being chased and hounded out from the gates of Vienna all over again, when in actuality, Islam never got this far north in Europe since then. And that's going to be the war of the future coming along. But it's great to have a reference point now that you can send people to, going, look, my other ethos on that again was, I may not have considered myself a Christian at that time, but I said, but this isn't right. I mean, that Christianity needs to be defended. Because if atheism and Islam and any other religions are persecuting these people, well, then I'm on the side of the persecuted people. I'm on the side of the downtrodden. Because, if you believe in a free and equal society for all people, if you see that one side is being left out or left behind, well, then I'm on that side. I want to defend that. I would be that foot soldier. And that's just seems to be how it's come about for me now, that I may be an early adopter or I may be an early voice, but I know there's many great voices and better voices that will come out behind me. And if this is what I'm going to do, then that's what I'll do, because it's the right thing to do. I always said that if I'm defending children, then it doesn't matter if I don't understand my histories as much, as long as I believe I'm speaking with my truth and only the truth. And I can't be waylaid or pushed aside because I'm speaking with the truth. And Christianity is under constant attack by design, because Christianity is the one that brings all communities together. That's from my understanding. Hinduism, Buddhism, they all have their places. Even Islam has its place. If only it would go through that reformation that we all desperately wanted to do. And there are many great voices like the Imam of Peace, Imam Tawaldi, who comes across with a different ethos. But because of the dogma of Islam, you have very serious risk of injury or death by speaking out about these things. But we must go through that. Some of us will fall. I recognize that. I get jousted. I'm walking around as enemy number one here. I'm nearly I wouldn't even elevate myself to that status, but I'm nearly considered the Tommy Robson of Ireland at this stage. They've been called fascist and white supremacist at this stage. And for what? For being a family man, for protecting children and family rights, wanting a better community for all but my people. And I'll wear that badge with honour. And I'll keep fighting.
My own take is really, we've not spoken very much at all. And as I listen to you speak here and now, I can see, excuse me, And I think other people will see you have a real strength. And I think that strength is incredibly inspiring for other people. So I think you will, and probably are already, an inspirational character, because you're not out there, you're not loud, you're not shouting around, you're trying to voice an opinion in a reasoned way and speak for the children and speak and bring discourse, public discourse. For anybody listening to this, it's called public discourse. It's where somebody has an opinion, somebody else has a bit of a different opinion, and you talk about it. It's not wrong. It's what should go on in any society that's looking to grow and take on different opinions. That is why WBN 324 and the likes, we went to radio, because there's loads of people doing YouTube, there's loads of people doing Twitter. I went the radio route because I had the radio background. So with that, there's nothing wrong with public discourse, and there's nothing wrong with people having a different opinion. But I completely agree with you, GT, that we have lost community. The key to that community, if we look back indigenously, was Christianity. Personally, I'm not a Christian, but I can see I grew up in Christian values. And I tell you what's not going on, because I've travelled a lot, and the old saying is, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I would suggest that's not what's going on here. We have a dominant culture coming in that has a really strong community. They have common goals that are diametrically opposed to our own. And I would like to be able to talk about it, if nothing else, GT.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
Right, that's it, guys. We're going to wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed it. You're listening to Rea Bow Plus One. I'm Rea, just outside London. I've got GT in Ireland. Thank you so much. Where can people find you, GT?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Gran Torino. I also have a website set up now, www.grantorino.ie. I encourage you all over there. We've got articles. All my videos are loaded up there and stored on the server. And I'm going to say it, I need it, but we also have donations page up there as well. We need your continued support to keep this platform going, because this is the only source of income for me that's keeping me going on the road. Also, you'll find me on Twitter, Rowan W. Croft. I use my full name. I've always been public. And Gab at grantorino.ie as well.
Okay, there you go, guys. So with this, if you're listening to this and you're of the opinion going, well, the mainstream, they're no good, we're not going to get informed, they're not going to talk about real people issues, children's issues, etc. If you are of that thought and you go, well, I'm not going to watch the BBC, I'm not even going to bother reading RTE and all those kind of mainstream corporate funded and public funded platforms, then it's probably maybe start getting your head around outfits like GT, Gran Torino, like ourselves, WBN 324. If we're out here publicly trying to amplify your thoughts and your voice. If you want to come and talk to me, go to WBN 324. Email me. Let's arrange something up there. I'd love to speak to you. Patriot or an opposing view. Personally, I don't mind. But it might be time where you go, look, find somebody online, be it GT, be it WBN 324, and support the new media coming through. Otherwise, before you know it, you won't hear my voice, you won't hear GT's voice, because we'll all be shut up in the name of political correctness and Marxism. Okay, they're not calling it Marxism, but it's looking a lot like it as this thing progresses, as we learn, as we piece all the dots together and go, hold it a minute, there's something wrong here. So just bear that in mind. A couple of bucks, it doesn't have to be a lot, you know, but as we're out here trying to amplify your thoughts, and we just need a little help, so it all helps. Right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, GT, so much for this interview. I hope to interview you again and any other patriots from Ireland. But meanwhile, we're going to catch you on the other side of this.
LiveRadio.ie allows you to listen to Irish and world radio stations online. LiveRadio.ie is easy to use with over 4,000 unique radio stations. Why us? Powered by advanced technology, liveradio.ie allows you to choose from thousands of radio stations around the world, helping you find exactly what you're looking for. Be ahead of the game at liveradio.ie.
This commercial was brought to you by Sunday Long Live Radio.